Calling to order. How's everybody doing? Happy New Year. And first on the agenda, we have anyone, any notes or feedback on the minutes from November 26th?
Yep.
We have a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to approve the minutes from last year.
Lori moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Charles? All right, any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes from November 26th, please raise your hand. Does anyone abstain from approving the minutes? Carol abstains. Anyone opposed to approving the minutes? All right, the motion passes. All right, President Shaw, your report.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everybody. Good to see you. Well, at many of my previous reports, I've talked about the search for the new Vice President for Enrollment Management and Student Affairs. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce you to the person we hired. So Neil Wolf began last week, and he and his family have moved to Medford, I believe. Neil, would you like to say just like a minute about your background?
Yeah. So I have background working in the Nevada System of Higher Ed as a research analyst and doing academic and student affairs policy work. Helped start a college, 4-year public school at Nevada State College, which was pretty fun. Was faculty senate chair for BID, and so.
Still the pay.
Good luck.
They can give you my email address for.
Yeah. Anyway, I come mostly from Eastern Washington University. I did similar work, and I'm really excited to be here at Southern Oregon University. My MO would be to leverage the academic experience of students in both recruitment and retention. The core of the institution is the academic enterprise, so that will be first and foremost in what I do and what our shop practice is. So I want to say thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you, President Schott. And Sue's been great. If there's anything related to recruitment, particular messaging, I'd love to receive feedback. So I'm open to that, so please don't hesitate. As I know many of you won't. I just want to let you know I'm open to that, and I encourage that, and I appreciate it. So thank you very much for that.
And your email address is?
Yeah, Sue Walsh at. It's Wolf M. It's WOOLF M.
Not N.
Not
M.
N. Yeah, it's M from the first name,
Which
which is Michael. So I don't know why my parents did that to me. I've always gone by my middle name, so I get extra in the will because of that.
It's worth it.
So Neil has jumped right in, and we're going to be working together and using his expertise as much as we can. I appreciate his offer, so if any of you have sort of nagging questions or anything, ideas, theories, complaints, feel free to reach out to him, and it's all of our jobs to try to ensure good learning opportunities for as many students as we can. The news is not so good on the search for the Chief Diversity and Inclusivity Officer. You know, we brought people to campus. We had a strong candidate. We made an offer, or actually she withdrew, I think, before we even made an offer. We believe she was really leveraging her current position. And you know, there's no way to tell that when you're in a search. So what we have decided to do, Shanika is back in Oklahoma, but much like Blaine did in the last few months, she will work for a few hours a week, kind of trying to keep progress moving forward. And then because these CDIO positions are hard to hire and they're in demand around the country, we're going to use the same search firm that we used for Neil's position. It's a flat fee. They know us. They've worked with us. They have a lot of materials already developed. And the timeline that they have put forward is that we would have people to campus by early April. So the virtue of using those search firms is that they go out and they beat the bushes and they really try to find the candidates. And Neil said that they were great working with him. It made him feel good about the search and about the institution and stuff. So that's how we're going to move forward. Continue to see this as a very important position and look forward to having that expertise as soon as we can get it on our team. And then we'll be pretty much staffed up for a while. Jody will retain the interim Title IX coordinator position until we get this finished. Let's see. I remember we had an enrollment summit in November, and I promised that we would have another summit dealing with the retention side of things. We were waiting for Neil to get here, so we don't have the date for that yet, but it will be sometime, we believe, in February. And so stay tuned for more information on that. And we are working on the professional learning communities, thanks to all of you who have volunteered for those. We've got lists of volunteers. A lot of people volunteered for more than one. The holidays interfered, but now we're going to finalize that and try to get those launched ASAP. We also are going to start having forums on, well, I want to inform campus as much as possible about what's happening with the legislative session and how that may impact our budget. You know, there's everything from total disaster to, you know, heaven comes early, right, in what might happen out there. And I know it's going to cause a lot of uneasiness. So we will plan some forums where we sort of talk about the financial picture as it is, what are some of the eventualities, and certainly as things develop, we'll be keeping the campus informed. We'll be doing our first sort of overview and briefing on this at the board meeting this Friday. So if any of you are, you know, like sitting on the edge of your seat, just really wanting to know, feel free to join the board meeting on Friday afternoon and get the big picture. Speaking of the board, having been in existence for 3 years, is making a few changes to its bylaws. And they notified Andrew, I think, and Sabrina notified faculty, the APSU president. They are routine. There is nothing there that is substantive. If you want to go and look at them, it's in the board materials. You can go through and see every little change that's being made. But there's really, you know, it's like, I don't know, names of officers, you know, just clean up. Well, much like you guys have been doing with your bylaws, just kind of cleaning up little things that needed cleaning up. And then finally, and this, I think I mentioned this earlier, and Andrew sent something out. I want to create a committee I'm calling the University Ceremonies Committee. It would look at commencement, convocation, and homecoming. Because we had treated those as 3 discrete events that don't really connect. I really believe that they should not be discrete events. They're critical experiences in the lives of our students, whether they're coming in, whether they're graduating, or after they leave us. And I think there's synergy if we can work on thinking about them as a package that we do every year and how they can strengthen each other. So I would love to have a faculty member or 2, somebody who cares about ceremony in some way, or cares about these experiences in the lives of students and alumni, to participate on that. And I know when we first sent the invitation out, it was right before the holidays and finals were upon us. So please think about yourself or somebody else who would be good for that.
So Linda, is that just for the actual 3 ceremonies, or does that include also the breakfast, this, and the thing with the parents? Is it the whole week of ceremonies, or just those 3 events?
You mean like for convocation?
Mm-hmm. And house,
Yes.
homecoming? Is it that more than just the game and?
Homecoming is, it's been kind of run by athletics. So this committee, I hope, would look at, what do we want homecoming to be? How can it serve us? Can it increase retention in some way? Can it increase donations to the university? I mean, whatever it is. So, yeah, it's a little bit broader. But basically, like, what do we want commencement to be? Commencement was kind of a little bit of a wreck last year. It got way too long, you know. So we just need to pay attention to these things and make sure that it's achieving the purpose that we want it to achieve.
Just to clarify, so this is a committee that would be just till the end of the year?
No,
or-
I think it would, I think the bulk of the work will be in the first year,
Okay, but
but
it's
then I
ongoing.
could see it going on, because right now, it's like, who's gonna be our commencement speaker? I'd really rather have a group thinking about, well, who would we like to have a commencement speaker? What are our goals? What are our expected outcomes? How do we achieve those? Okay, so it's really just being more thoughtful about these ceremonies and making sure that we're putting our best foot forward on all of these.
And just for practical reasons, how often do you imagine that committee meeting?
I imagine in the first, between now and commencement, it might meet a couple of times a month. After that, you know, I don't think it's gonna be a real heavy workload, and maybe it'll decide that it needs to go away. I'm not necessarily setting it up as a long-term standing committee.
Something you got a question?
Who's the contact person for that? Because we used to have Matt Stillman you know, there's always been a person who's kind of been in charge of.
For right
But-
now, if you're interested, just let me know.
Okay.
Jody is gonna be, I think, kind of helping organize it.
I just want to say that that the logistics committee is
Separate
not
committee.
going away. It's still, I mean, we still have to have people setting up chairs and
Right.
going to the nursery and getting the flowers and, you know, making sure the podiums match. And so all that stuff will still be done by the group that's been doing it, facilities and folks like that.
Yeah, so it's a separate committee.
It's more content-based and sort of purpose and objectives. What are we trying to achieve?
And I'm also inviting a couple of community members to be on that, because like commencement, we bring a ton of people in, but there's not been coordination with the city. And last year Shakespeare opened at the same weekend. So just trying to get more people thinking about the fact that SOU is a big presence in this area, and when we have these kinds of ceremonies, it has the potential to bring a lot of people in. And how do we make that serve the employers, the businesses of our community, and not be a handicap for them in some way? So that's what it is.
For the minutes, Jennifer is the contact for?
Yeah, that would be fine. Send it to, if you're interested, or if you know somebody, or you send it to Andrew, and Andrew will get it to me.
Jennifer.
Send it to Jennifer.
I'll put her email in the minutes.
But really, talk to folks, I mean, and see if there's this might be a good committee for a newer person who has excitement and wants to really kind of get involved in the life of the university in this way.
Is that to promote the old ones?
Yeah.
No, because I know we're already working you on a lot of other committees. So I think that's everything. Anybody have any questions for me? It's going to be a rocky road in the legislature. Just know that we're thinking about it, and we're going to do the best we can. The goal will be for all of us here on campus to stay as united as we can in terms of our how we're expressing the needs of the university and the needs of our students. We have the legislative advisory team. All right, thank you. I hope your quarter is off to a good start.
Great, thanks. Welcome back, everyone, and I hope you had peaceful and fruitful holidays. I just wanted to personally thank Neil for accepting the position, and I'm so glad he's here, and I think we're going to make a good team. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but we're already collaborating on things and identifying areas that we need to prioritize, and he'll be a great colleague, and I'm very excited that he's joined us. I'll do two quick things. One is just a reminder, as President Schott mentioned, we do have board meetings this week. We have the Academic and Student Affairs Committee meeting on Thursday, and the Finance Committee meeting on Thursday afternoon as well. First one is, I believe, at 12. The notices went out, all the campus public notices went out, so, but the reason I wanted to mention that is because we are putting forward the digital cinema major for approval from the Academic and Student Affairs Committee, who are empowered by the board to approve curriculum. So we're very excited about that. Andrew will be at the meeting, presenting and answering questions, maybe asking some, I don't know. So that is moving forward. Then the next step will be to Provost Council, and then eventually the HEC, so that we can start advertising the major very soon. So that's very exciting for us, and I haven't heard from any of the other institutions yet. The other provosts know that we're putting this forward, so right now we're kind of smooth sailing through, but I'll walk. The second thing is the University of Guanajuato and Southern Oregon University are celebrating their 50th anniversary as part of the bigger celebration between the cities. And we are planning the university to university piece of it. We're focusing on conversations around curriculum and pedagogy for the future, and we are working with the delegation there who will be coming here, led by their president, on some events. You'll hear more about that, but we want to get faculty involved. We'll be taking faculty down there. We're bringing faculty here. We're commissioning pieces of music for fall.
I know, my wife's
I know. Jody's one of them. So we are very excited. We've got a lot planned, but it'll be really important to have the faculty involved in that. Now, the city will be doing city-to-city stuff. The chamber will be doing chamber-to-chamber. So there's other things going on, but really focusing on the institutional relationships for this particular anniversary is our focus.
So do you have dates?
Yes, I do, and that was, yes.
Oh,
yes,
all right.
Thank you. 4/8, 4/9, and 4/10, so April 8, 9, 10. And we're trying to kind of match their delegation, and they're kind of trying to do the same thing, so we have like people who can talk and visit and share ideas. So I'm very excited, and yeah.
But Neil's office is in my suite. So if you're looking for him, he's right where Gene Stallman was. Gene has moved down the hall to where Sabrina's office is, and where Shanitha was. Chad Hamill, the ACE Fellow, the Vice President of Native American Initiatives, is where Shanitha was. So I now have Chad and Neil as in my office suite, if you want to find them at some point.
Sounds like a board game.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I'm, in the interest of time, I'll hold back. More to come.
All right. Marian?
Not really, because the one thing I was going to talk about, we put on the agenda. So I just would like to welcome Carol, who's back, and Carol, who's back.
Thank you. Let's find your son in.
All right, we have Anna Lapierre is going to sit in for Larry to present the new curriculum from undergraduate, or sorry,
Yeah, so there's what we have approved in the fall in that folder. There's a variety of courses like the community usually does, have a representative from the department come in, talk to us, kind of tell us why they want this new class. We look through the paperwork and then we've approved these. And so now they're just looking to go for the last step from ours. Do you have any questions that I could try to remember from the fall?
I had just one question. Maybe you can remember this or not. This is for the SOAN. I think it's 493. It's an evaluation strategies course. Do you remember that one?
Just read more. Ask your question.
It says they learn a variety of program evaluation strategies. That it just struck me, and it says including basic statistical analyses and data collection.
Yeah.
But they have no prereq or steps. And
That-
I was just wondering. That's the only thing I saw. I was kind of like, I wonder why. So wouldn't we
I
already have recommended?
I think that we did recommend that. I think that was one of the last ones, and it didn't, might have got updated, but we told them that I seem to remember that we did
Is
suggest
there anybody from?
from
SOAN?
math and
so. It's through, but
Yeah.
it's cold.
So,
I don't
that
remember
would,
that.
I mean, I don't wanna like curtail all the other ones, but that
Yeah.
one needed clarification.
If I remember, I wish, you know, I could call back every paper that I saw in that committee. But there was one that had, we talked about stats a lot, and, it had a prereq of stats, so then
One other one does, but this one doesn't.
I don't know, we can always go back as the committee and look at that, a little bit more carefully, if we wanna not vote on that one.
Well, we have 2 weeks then.
Yeah, oh,
So it's not, we're not under pressure.
yeah, so I can,
Okay, so maybe get clarification.
yeah, which,
That
what
would
number
be
was it
great.
again?
It was 493.
493.
Program evaluation, just as junior standing or above, I know stats.
Yeah, I think there was, I seem to remember a conversation around that, and I'll go back and look at the minutes and get that, yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Want to send back to the committee before we vote in 2 weeks?
And we meet on Friday, so I'll see them twice between now and when we meet again.
Before we move on, Mark, also welcome back.
All right, we're moving a little fast, and my next person isn't here, so let's go ahead and move to, well, this might be a long conversation.
Jeff, would you feel comfortable
Sure.
going up now?
Sure.
Let's move to Jeff Gayton, talk about HB 2871 some more.
I think last time I stood here, so I'll move over there so the other half of the room gets to see.
Okay.
But I don't need any projectors or anything. Last time I was here to talk about House Bill 2871. This is a law that requires Oregon public institutions to identify courses that have either low-cost materials or no-cost or low-cost materials. They didn't define what low-cost means, so that's up to us. The sense of the room here thought $50 seemed appropriate. I talked to Student Senate last week. They seem to think that $50 seems like a good number. That's what most of our peers have done in Oregon, so I think that's going to be the number. One update, though, is it's not possible to base it on the used book cost. The bookstore can't guarantee that they'll be able to get the used book, so we're going to have to calculate this amount based on what the new cost is. So that's obviously going to reduce the number of courses that we can identify as low cost, which is unfortunate, but this way we'll make sure that there aren't going to be any unpleasant surprises. In fact, students might get a pleasant surprise by finding out that the books are a little bit less expensive than they thought. I looked at the bookstore data. They sent me what they would send me to get this ball rolling for next term using this current term's data. It was kind of interesting. I thought you might want to know. Of the roughly 1,200 courses and sections being taught this term, 546 courses would be considered no cost. However, about half of those are applied music, yeah, and then a lot of them were athletics things. So it's not all, yeah.
How many did you say?
546.
I teach all of those.
I saw your name under quite a few of them, actually.
Yeah, so for instance, we have a 3-term sequence for our general chemistry, and they buy the book the first term. But they don't have to buy it the second or third term, they use it all year, but it's still listed as a required text. Does that mean that Gen Chem 2 and 3 have no text and are free, because they are, or is it what that cost is again on our students?
Right, so that's something we're still trying to figure out, because the way that we do the calculations is just going to look at the number. There is a question about that. Would we want to amortize that over 3 terms, but then not every student is going to take all 3 terms of some of the courses, depending on how the sequence works. We're still trying to work that out. We don't have a good solution to that. Whenever you kind of get away from just doing the raw numbers, everything starts to get a little funky and that much more difficult to manage. Because it's actually, with over 1,200 courses listed, it's quite a bit of data to go through. So we're still trying to figure that out. But thank you. 156 courses would be considered low cost. And then the bookstore didn't receive any information from about 206 courses. So that's the other part of this plea. Since we're using the bookstore to get compliant with this law, it's really important that they get the adoption information as quickly as possible. And that means adoption even if you're not adopting any textbooks. They want to know. It will help them get us compliant, but it's also good information for the bookstore because the bookstore often has students coming to them saying, I don't see the book on the shelf, do you know what's going on? And if they can say, oh yeah, they're on this list, there are no required materials for this course. That'll be really helpful for students.
So just for the notes, you're saying that if someone is teaching a course, they know they're not using any books, they still need to send in a form saying no required textbooks.
That's correct. Because otherwise we won't know and your course wouldn't be flagged as being a low cost or no cost.
And so just to be sure, that's the only way that they know. They never sent us a survey or a questionnaire asking how much the books we were requesting were going to cost. I'm just wondering if I missed the message on that, or if it's just through the regular
You can
form
let
that
them
they
know. I mean, you
figure
can use
out.
the form. You can send an email direct to Adam. He's happy to do it that way as well. Really, he just wants to get the information, and in order to basically be compliant with the law, we need to have that. The bookstore needs to have that information a month before registration opens. So this year, that would put it at January 25th.
So I had a question. When you said ID courses is low cost, do you mean ID them where? Where is the ID going?
So there'll be a flag in the bookstore online that'll say that, but within the course schedule, when you're looking at courses, there's actually going to be, there'll be a flag for it that'll say that. That's going to be something that Matt Stillman's going to be working on. And they'll also be able to search for low cost or no cost courses.
With regards to that, it would help those of us that have a text for the whole year to be included in that because students will be looking for, you see my point there.
Yeah.
If there's, I know you said there's no way around it, but.
Well, we're starting that conversation. I know, obviously, are there kind of course cost information we could possibly provide? You know, there are limits to the system. We weren't able to be in compliance with this law for a while because of the limitations of our system. And Matt finally reached out and said, hey, we can do this now. And so that's kind of why we're jumping on it now. We're actually at least a year behind in terms of complying with this law.
Is this, I believe whenever you put forth textbooks, there's required and recommended. Is this only for required textbooks?
Yes, it is only for required textbooks. That's what the law specifies, so that's what we're going to do.
I mean, I'm sort of repeating the point that was brought up twice before, but it seems like it'd be an easy footnote or second asterisk or something. Even if we have calculus at State History, and you could label every one of the calculus high cost, I guess, because straightforwardly, if you're coming into that class for the first time, you got to buy this expensive book. But you could label all of those courses that in that bundle note, multiple courses getting by the same book or something. It's like an easy footnote to add. I don't know.
Because it makes a lot more classes low cost. If you think about averaging that expensive book over multiple courses.
No, I completely agree. If a student is going to be taking multiple courses and using the same book, yeah, they're not buying the book 3 times. It's misleading to suggest otherwise. We'll continue to see if we can find ways to manage that without it getting really complicated. Yeah, because I take your point. It's a reasonable one. I get it completely.
Any other questions?
That's
So you said January 25th?
January 25th. That's a month before we go live for spring registration.
That's earlier than we have typically.
It is earlier, so the reason why is that the bookstore actually can't run that report themselves. They actually have to go to Barnes & Noble Corporate and have them run the report, and then we need the time in Matt's office to get all that information, get it cleaned up and added so he can get that in the course system. So it is earlier, you're right.
So you're hoping that the word gets out to all faculty to have the books reported to the bookstore by January 24th?
That's correct.
Even if they're not?
Even if they're not, and I've talked to Adam, and he's going to make it much more clear in his email, saying, it's not just if you're ordering books from the bookstore that I want to hear from you. I want to hear from everyone what they're doing.
Well, you should probably go today. Any other questions for Jeff?
Thank you very much.
Ryan.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Raya Safety. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the coordinator for the Women's Resource Center. Saw many of you last year in this meeting, but at that time, folks had not had an opportunity to look at this proposed policy. So I'm aware that folks have had that opportunity this time. So I'm just back again to kind of go over the bullet points of the proposed policy and answer any questions that you might have as I move forward in putting this policy forward to the president. So the policy is about sexual violence prevention, training, and assessment. We don't currently have a policy at SOU about providing training and assessment around prevention. We are actually required by federal law to have one. So it'd be really important for us to adopt a policy, this policy. So the first part is really just definitions. These definitions are mostly taken from our SAD 007 policy. So nothing really new. There's a lot of definitions. And then moving into the policy statement, it's really just talking about the different pieces that SOU is committed to as an institution to address sexual violence. So for students, requiring that all incoming students would complete our online module that does go out to them prior to the school year, that they would have 6 weeks into the quarter to complete that. Currently, we do send that out. We do not require anybody to complete it. We've had really, really low completion rates this year. I believe it's less than 10%. For faculty and staff, we would require that every 2 years, faculty and staff complete 2 hours of sexual violence prevention training. Moving forward, all student fee funded entities, so clubs and organizations, would be required to annually go through some prevention training. And academic programs would be encouraged to proactively address within their curricula strategies for preventing sexual violence, harassment, ICU, misconduct in their larger discipline. And then the last piece would just be about our commitment to assessment. So that would be doing a campus climate survey every 4 years. Yes.
So I noticed that you said in there about clubs and organizations. Yes. So would that be like getting the students twice? Would the students be going through kind of the same training 2 times if they were?
That's a good question, and I think that we'd probably be looking at, if they were an incoming student who had gone through the module, then looking at what could be an additional piece that could be offered. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
All right, is any of this impacted by the sort of looming Title IX changes?
So that's a very good question. So there are some pretty big proposed changes to, sorry, I talked to my hands, so I'm like, I don't know what to do with this paper. Proposed to Title IX. And there's actually going to be a forum on Thursday that Angela and I are going to co-facilitate. She's like walking down the hallway right now as I'm talking about her. So she's going to talk about some of those proposed changes and potential impacts, and then I'm going to talk about ways to make public comment, which we would love to see as many folks at SOU make public comment. Currently, that comment period is open through January 28th. There are rumors that it will be extended through March, but that has not yet been confirmed. So do come on Thursday if you want to know more about how you can take action or encourage students to take action at this time. The proposed Title IX changes aren't really directed at prevention as much as response, right? Because Title IX is really talking about how in which we are going to respond when any of these things happen. So this policy, as far as I know, wouldn't be impacted in terms of us offering these opportunities for folks to come and have exposure to prevention ideas and education. Yeah, yes.
Do you have any examples and materials for curriculum development and what academic programs are doing to implement this kind of stuff in our curriculum?
Yeah, Andrew, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I can just speak to, in, for instance, the new proposed digital cinema major. Already in our concentration, we've been doing this. So Christopher Lucas and I have been working, particularly in a class, which is now called Digital Cinema Foundations, which is a class where our students learn who's who on the crew, what the tools are called, those kinds of things. We also do a whole module on consent, bystander awareness, that kind of stuff. And so we're really integrating that. In fact, Chris and I have been accepted into the WSSA conference where we're going to be presenting on the work we've been doing. So, and the students have been responding really well. I mean, I was having drinks with my wife at Alchemy, and a student who worked there came up to me and just said, "Thank you so much for what you all are doing in your program." So it's really good.
Right.
In addition to that, we have done some work in GSWS courses, done some work around stalking, harassment. I work with a team of peer educators, so we currently go into most of the USEM classes that will have us in, and we talk about consent and bystander interaction. We really talk about our culture that we live in and the impacts of culture and how that influences us. We make sure that all of our students know about the resources and supports on campus. So I think all of that is to say that there are some things that we're doing already, and we're also really open to like meeting with faculty to talk to you about ideas that you might have that would really relate to what you're teaching in your classes and how we could connect that to some of these broader issues and empower students to be allies, to be involved in the movement, to care about what's going on, and kind of better understand the resources on campus as well. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions?
You threw a stat out there, and I just want to make sure I understood it. You said less than 10% compliance. Was that for students, for the campus community as a whole?
For students.
Students,
yeah.
okay.
We actually had pretty good completion last year with staff and faculty when it was sent out. I don't know exactly what that number was, but it was like in the high 90s that staff and faculty completed the online module. Yeah, but the truth is if you don't complete it, you just continue to get reminder emails. Yeah.
You said we're supposed to have this policy.
Yeah.
And we don't have it.
Correct.
So what's the deadline of us having something established?
I'm looking to, I don't actually know the answer to that. I know that the Clery Act requires that we have a policy. I am aware that we have been audited by Clery, and I don't know if y'all can speak to that a little bit more than I can. That's sort of not my area specifically, but I know that we have communicated that we are working on a policy as an institution.
Do you have like do we need to have it in place at the end of
like
this
by the end of this week, actually. It's pressing. No, I don't know the answer to that, but I can follow up and let you know.
I don't remember that, I know Ryan Shelbrick has looked at our Title IX compliance, and highlighted places we're engaged in the management response to that. So, as with a lot of these things, it's, you want to do your best, you want to move it in as fast as you can, but I don't remember the details of that audit and whatever may have come from outside. But obviously we want to comply, we want to do what we need to do.
Right, can you speak to your timeline of I know you've taken this to the directors, when do you expect it to go to the policy council for review at that point?
I mean, I would love for that to happen this quarter, if possible, so I have other folks that I'm taking it to before pushing it forward.
If it's already gone to the directors, maybe this has been answered, but I was just wondering about the 2-hour mandatory meeting that you mentioned, the 2-hour mandatory.
The 2 hours every 2 years for
yeah,
staff
every
and
2
faculty.
years.
Mm-hmm.
That would only be for full-time faculty and not for term-by-term people that are paid hourly as adjuncts?
That is not clearly outlined in the policy. So I was made aware that faculty currently already complete training every 2 years. Is that just for full-time?
That's what it's supposed to be, and they're notified by HR to prompt. But I don't think I think it's any employees. I don't think it would be just full-time faculty. I think it's anyone who interacts with anyone else on campus even for one term.
So they would be.
So every 2 years, so let's say they teach for us, fall, and then the following year, they would be up for again, yeah.
So they're expected to do that gratis? Because they're paid per hour, they're not on salary.
It's part of their condition of employment, I believe. Yeah, there's certain things that people just have to do.
Also, upon the hire, there is a current requirement that so many days after you start your job that you go through the training as well. That's my understanding.
New employees.
Yeah.
We have to show as an institution that we've done our due diligence to train our employees on these policies.
Any other questions? All right, one more time, could you say the time and place of that meeting?
Yeah, so this Thursday, it's at 4:30 p.m. and it's right here in SU 323, the gallery, just out and around. It'll be about 1 hour depending on how many questions folks have. So please come if you can't make it, but you're interested or you would like to kind of learn more about how you could make comment during this time of public comment, or you're curious about what some of those major changes are and how they could impact us as an institution, please do let me know. I'd be happy to send you pretty easy links and information. There's a great template that's out there from the Women's Law Center, And it really just, you can kind of insert different pieces. It's not a form letter. They really encourage you to make comments that are like personal and rooted in our community and experiences here. Those have more weight than sending in a form letter online. There has been, I believe, over 55,000 comments that have been made since it's been open, so.
And the university legal councils have all worked together and are making comments, I believe, from the perspective of the public universities.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
All right, so next up we have proposed changes to bylaws 5.223 and 5.223C. I should have made myself a cheat sheet for this today. A little background on this proposed change. This originally came as kind of a set of kind of conventional proposed bylaws changes in some form. There was sort of, I think, broad pushback from Senate at that time about the way those particular changes were proposed. At that point, a working group was formed, led by Ed Battistella, which is why he's come back. And that working group put together a new proposal, worked for a while, brought that proposal back to Senate about a year ago, I think. That's right. Or was it 2?
2 years.
2 years ago.
May of 17.
Yeah, that's right, 17.
Yep.
At that time, the changes were presented to Senate. There really, if you look at the video, there wasn't much discussion. There was sort of like some kind of nodding around the room, and then it was said, all right, so now this goes to the bylaws committee, and they will bring it back. And for reasons we won't explore, because we're not really sure, we never came back. But there were those who thought it had been done and voted on, and so there are people potentially who are going up for promotion this year who thought this was already in place, and that's sort of how it came up. I think a faculty member contacted Sue to ask the question, and Sue was going to refer them to this bylaw, couldn't find the bylaw, asked me where did the bylaw go, and we found it. And then Lori did some very good work to bring it back to us, so I did share it with everyone before the break, asked everyone to look at it thoroughly, and now we're going to discuss it. So before we go any further, I was hoping that Ed could maybe speak a little bit to thinking of the working group and the thought that went into that, and then anyone who wants to comment after that, have at it. You've got plenty of time.
Yeah, and I'll be quick. I think you've covered most of the sort of history of this back in the fall of 2016, I think it was. Sue asked a group of us to get together and look at what other institutions did as far as early promotion for people with years in rank, and then also people who might want to come up earlier in the regular promotion cycle. It was Carol, Deborah Rosenberg, Greg Jones, and me. We looked at a handful of other universities in the state, put together a couple of proposals, one of which was to sort of set up a kind of probation period for someone who comes here from another university with years in rank, so that we could see how they worked at SOU before they jumped into a promotion cycle. And then the other was to see if we could clarify the language around early promotion, because it seemed to create bad feelings if someone was promoted and the department wasn't fully in on the discussion, or if someone was blocked from early promotion for whatever reason, or blocked from trying. So we put together a proposal for that was fairly restrictive, brought it to the Senate. There was a lot of discussion that was too restrictive. We got, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 or so emails from various folks. We came with a revised proposal, which basically left the old system intact, but added the step that the Department Personnel Committee would be involved in documenting a case for early promotion so that department personnel committees were not blindsided, basically. And then we brought it to the Senate in May of 2017 for that brief bit of discussion that you mentioned. So yeah, that's sort of where, anything to add?
Well, I think the most controversial piece that we originally brought, that we changed, was to reduce the time that a faculty member had to be present on this campus before they could go forward for promotion. And it went from, if you read the old, 5 years to 1. So that was a big change, and that reflected faculty's take on the fact that new faculty were coming with experience from other institutions that we wanted to consider. So that was a big change. And the Senate at the time said, yeah, that sounds good, but it never came back to the Constitution Committee.
So the question I have is, and maybe this is a part of the problem, is what does early promotion mean? Because I know at least 2 people in my division who came as assistant year in 1 rank, and then they went up early for promotion, so they went up in year 4. And so that was always what I defined as what early promotion is. But it seems that in the last couple of years, when we've hired people with years in rank, is that qualifying as early promotion? Or is that a separate?
Yeah, I think technically that would be a separate category. So the question that the committee dealt with was, how many years at SOU are required before the university wants to make a decision on someone?
I don't know if you would know this, Sue, but first, has there been any precedent where in the very first year of a new hire at SOU that they applied for promotion?
No, not that I know of. I think that was part of what we were trying to get at with this work, at least partly.
So Brian, did that answer your question? What is early promotion? Because
Well, yeah, because it seems like there's 2. There's this standard, you come here year 1, and then early would be you go up in year 4. And then the following year, you're also eligible for tenure. So you're basically, 4th year, you're applying for promotion, and then your 5th year, you're applying for tenure.
So even if someone came with years in rank, they don't necessarily have to go up before their 5th year.
Correct.
Correct.
But the question
So
would be,
the
are
question
they
is-
eligible to if they come in with, if
Right,
they
they
came
would
in
be
year rank
eligible
5.
if they chose to do that. That's how I interpret that.
But
yeah.
early could even be earlier. I mean, early never meant just 1 year early. I mean, it's not really, there's no indication
Fairly
of what
rare.
that would be.
But yeah.
But it was, so maybe you could address this, it was in the past not as common to have faculty go through the promotion process before their 5th year, usually.
Correct.
So this change reflects the change in the faculty we're getting with more experience coming here, with teaching experience from another institution, and being able to apply that towards their record of their teaching and scholarship skills. So I think we heard what faculty were telling us, and we wanted to honor that. Because I approached it.
Second question, I sent out a call to our constituents in the social science, and I didn't get 20,
Oh, okay.
but I got a bunch back in 4 days. One of the questions somebody asked is, instead of changing the bylaws, couldn't this be resolved in the hiring letter? And saying, we're hiring you with 4 years in rank, you wouldn't be permitted to go up for promotion.
It already is.
Okay.
We actually made that change a couple of years ago for this very reason. So it actually does have a couple of sentences about this is how many years in rank you're getting. Here's when you would be eligible, but we are not guaranteeing that
You'd earn it.
That's right.
You're just saying,
Or
here's the
that-
first opportunity.
that's right.
Okay.
Yep.
So if that's the situation, then, I mean, a question I have is, do we have to change the bylaws?
I would like to speak to a change in the bylaws. Do I have time? Yeah.
Andrew?
So,
So I would like to make a suggestion that there does have to be a change in the bylaws. My colleague Margaret Perro applied for the ability to apply early for her promotion to full professor. And I think that there are a lot of problematic aspects to the bylaws as they stand. I think there are also problematic aspects to the bylaws in their proposed iteration for revision. The first problem that I saw with the bylaws is that there isn't a very clear process articulated for either the faculty member that is applying or for the people that the person is submitting information to. So there isn't a clear process for the chair and how the chair is supposed to work on the notation for that person so that that notation could go in the file. There isn't clear information for the division director. When I approached my division director on what to do when someone wanted to apply early, I'm not really clear on what that is. And so that part of the process needs to be articulated in terms of, what does that sort of submission process look like? Does a person submit a rationale? So in our case, Margaret submitted a rationale that explained how she had, from the last promotion to the current promotion that she was seeking to apply for, and just be able to submit her application. So she wasn't asking to be promoted, she was just asking for the chance to be allowed her application in. She documented that she had worked sufficient hours in constructing and bringing up the organ writing project that was over a year's worth of time that she had documented, and she felt that in addition to her scholarship, she has a book deal, the articles she published, etc., the service she gives to campus and the community, and her teaching effectiveness, that she was ready to move on into and to ask and request that that she apply early for promotion or be allowed to apply early. So the process for the applicant isn't entirely clear. She submitted a rationale, and this process was initiated on November 14th of last term, and we didn't get a decision until last week. And I think that speaks to the problems in sort of the bylaws and the clarity. And I want to speak to a couple of other points in lack of clarity, but I think that there should be a clearer process so that all of the parties that are involved are clear on what they are supposed to be looking at, what's supposed to be submitted. Margaret submitted a rationale that essentially made the case like, hey, here's where I think I fit the sort of rare circumstance and why I should be allowed. I looked at it, I consulted with my division director, I thought that she made a good case. And then what happened was, it appears that perhaps, and maybe Sue, you can clarify, that that the rationale she submitted was perhaps insufficient because there needed to have been a more significant portfolio, and that isn't really clear in the bylaws per se. So that's the first problem. Second problem is that when we look at the language itself is also really unclear. What is meant by rare circumstance? What is meant by significant portfolio? We don't have any examples, we don't have benchmarks, we don't have any of these things. So I think that what this allows is for a great amount of subjectivity. And so that language without benchmarks is really problematic. The third thing that I think is really problematic, and it's unfair to faculty, is I think that there should be a designated timeline in which all of the parties that are evaluating the piece should respond to the applicant. Because I think that it is unfair to have a process initiated on November 14th and to have to wait until the beginning of this term for a decision. What would have happened if she had received a yes? She's like waiting to apply for something that is due at the end of this month. So I think that there has to be a particular type of timeline that all of the parties abide by, so that the faculty, you know, is not on pins and needles, and so that there's some resolution. I don't know if you want to add anything, Margaret.
I just want to thank you for allowing us to be present. And I'm here just to answer questions if anybody has questions about my particular experience. I'm really happy for this to be a test case and to help resolve some of the issues with the lack of clarity in the language of the bylaws. And I really want to reiterate what Elma Rosa said. It seems to me that there are two separate issues. One is the process itself, which in contrast to the process for applying regular applications for promotion and tenure is quite unclear and ambiguous. And the second piece is the language in the bylaws. And in my case, because it's not similar to what you were talking about before, this was an application requesting permission to apply for a one-year early promotion to full professor. So it didn't involve any of the prior experience or coming with years in rank. It was to be considered separately, right? So that's one thing that sets this apart. The other thing is the language changes that Ed's talking about, and the language changes that were held up as there may be this change. In my case, that would have been fine, and I don't see a problem particularly with adding in the division personnel committee as a next step that a person would go through. That makes sense to me, so that, as Ed says, that committee wouldn't be blindsided when the application does come around, right? So that feels like a logical progression. But that's a separate issue from the language in the bylaws that seems to have been the obstacle in this case as far as making a determination. And that is what you pointed out. What is a rare circumstance and what is a significant portfolio? So I had the support of my chair and my division director, and obviously we were not on the same page with provost. So that's just a problem in the clarity in the bylaws as they currently are, and I just wanted to make sure that that's brought to your attention as you consider what needs to be reworded or not reworded in that document.
Before I go to Carol, I just want to make sure we understand for the record sort of what you just presented. Am I understanding correctly that you're saying that the proposed changes you don't think would do any harm, they're just wholly insufficient to address the harms that are there?
Yes. So for example, I feel fairly confident, because we just did a colleague review of Margaret, that that our personnel committee, our humanities and culture personnel committee, would have found her rationale clear and would have supported it, right? But given the odd language, so I think that doesn't solve the problem that we have in this particular case.
So in that task force, we looked at that language for many meetings because actually the provost's office had a problem with actually identifying that too. Like what constitutes significant portfolio? What does that mean? And we couldn't, as 4 individuals, come up with how do you define that? So we chose the wimpy way out, not to change that particular language, because it's like who defines what's significant in different disciplines, for example. And so maybe that language really does need to be revisited, but it's really hard. If you want to make an exception to some kind of procedure, then you have to be very clear what constitutes the exception, and you can't anticipate all of those. So we had a difficult, and maybe you remember those discussions? We couldn't agree?
I've tried to forget. But
yeah,
I can build it out maybe a little bit. Part of our original charge from Sue was to clean up the vagueness as much as possible. Right. And what we found was that discipline by discipline, there was sort of no way to prescribe this in advance. And the sort of idea was that at each level, some professional judgment would be exercised by the chair, the division director, the provost, and so on. And that the best solution we could come up with was to have it documented as close to the disciplinary area as possible, like people that sort of knew what counts as exceptionality in music and math and so on, and use that as a way to sort of put forward the case. And then, but yeah, we couldn't come up with these are the benchmarks across disciplines. We sort of knew it when we saw it. If there's a Nobel laureate that's sort of obvious. If it's just a regular faculty member who wants to come up with a year early, that's obvious. Everything in the middle was tough.
So is there a reason, I mean, we have disciplinary centric guidelines for promotion tenure anyway. Is there a reason we couldn't make a change in the bylaws that's also charged every program to define that?
Define it?
Define what's special in each program?
You want to do
Well,
that?
I just don't
have a question.
You said that,
Isn't
I think you answered your own question.
Isn't it a special case if somebody in year 6 as associate reaches the preferred or exceptional for all the categories a year earlier? Shouldn't it be like a checklist from that? Could that not work?
I just want to say that we were explicitly told that that was not sufficient
Oh.
for early promotion, which was fine. We completely understood that was not the criterion.
Although I do have to say that, I mean, it becomes really sort of difficult in you know, if we're talking about people from the discipline deciding what is exceptional, and in this case, you know, sure, I could be deluded. I work with Margaret, I like her, so maybe, you know, but when you have like the chair, in this case myself, and the division director agreeing that there is something exceptional about this person, and believe me, I don't think that all my colleagues are exceptional. Ed. You know, that I think that it creates a something where it becomes open to a type of subjectivity.
Can I ask a question? Just because Kimball was part of a decision that was made on behalf of a department where a faculty member did go up early for professional track promotion and was denied at the program level and then again at the faculty personnel committee level.
Right.
He's pretty intimately knowledgeable about this particular issue. Part of the reason I went to the group and asked for the work stems from that experience. And I would just like to hear from him if I am allowed to ask for that.
Well, you were going to hear from me eventually anyway.
Okay.
And then, so I knew that case would be in your mind too. So, and I really, by the way, think these bylaws could have fixed that problem because what was going on in our department was that the person probably would not have gotten the notation from the departmental personnel committee, or at least it would have not been clear cut. And at that point in the old bylaws, I'm speaking for change here because in the old ones, it did appear to that departmental personnel committee that since the chair agreed and the director agreed and to the extent she got involved in it, the provost agreed, that it was almost a done deal. And that wouldn't matter what the departmental personnel committee thought. So that just got that whole process up on the wrong foot. So I really like the fact that these bylaws changes will involve the departmental personnel committee. That's really good, we should do that.
We agree with that too.
Then the other thing I'd want to speak, just a little bit of sympathy for everybody involved in our time. First of all, there are conditions about how the process goes in the bylaws for regular promotion, but it isn't spelled out by dates and, you know, mother may I do this. It's a little more complete, but that's because everybody has to be able to go through it. I guess what I'm arguing for is I hope the bylaws can outline the sort of general idea and that, you know, policies and procedures can be developed as they have been and are done for regular promotion. So I guess we can all quibble. We ran into exactly these debates about what's exceptional, you know, the rare, there's always going to be interpretation. Let's just face that. But I guess I would like the bar to be relatively low to at least get permission to go up, you know. And I don't personally, you know, comes from a portfolio or whatever, you have to apply twice. Are you applying to apply? I mean, to me, this could have been something that could have been handled in a week if the bylaws permitted it and everybody agreed it would have been reasonable. This looks, you know, you err on the side of letting them do it. Because letting them do what? Spend many, many hours over their Christmas break writing up an application. We've all done it. Most of us have, at least once. Anyway, so my feeling is that we should have the bylaws be somewhat spare on spelling out the process, but we should also all agree that the process shouldn't be too onerous just to get permission to go up. The reason to have a process at all, I mean, why not anybody? Why not just check a box, I'm going up early? I mean, I think we have to be fair to our our philosophy and our people and all the work that we do, that there ought to be some initial check of, yeah, this has a chance of being good enough. So that's my feeling, and I think these bylaws would largely fix that.
So it's the personnel committee that would then, the person says, yeah, I want to try it, and they would look at the thing and say, the program.
Department.
Program departmental personnel committee, they would look at it and be like, yeah, I think this has a real shot, you've done all these exceptional things, or this is.
Well, they would be the first step of that. It sounds like what these bylaws would say, I don't think it's even sequential, it's all sort of, you've got to have all the parties kind of agree. It probably would start with program personnel.
Because if you don't do that notation, then already you're going to be.
Well, I mean, it's a real sign, I'm not speaking to Margaret's case at all, but if somebody says they want to go up early, you know, they really ought to have some buy-in from especially the program, but also their supervisors. But yeah, that, you at least have a case you can make.
Brian, you had your hand up a while ago.
Yeah, it's okay.
Sorry, Brian.
It's cool. If somebody on a normal promotion and tenure guideline, aren't they usually alerted at a certain date of they're eligible to go up for promotion?
Yeah. Sure, but if you are going up early, you wouldn't get that notification.
I know,
Yeah.
but I mean, there's
Yes,
a date.
yes.
So the only thing, at least for timeline, is I would say that if we change those bylaws and said, okay, and, you know, in a Supreme Court where you're just looking for probable cause, if we can just look at something in a quick way and say, yeah, this at least has the argument that it could be in a rare situation with a significant portfolio of achievements. Obviously, it's subjective, but let it pass forward. But I would make the argument for timeline. If someone would want to go up early for promotion, all of the consultation with the chair, the program personnel committee, division director, and the provost just say, okay, by around that time. And if it gets the notation, at least it's then at the same time where everybody else is on equal footing.
My proposal was to have it done at least by the end of the term, so that if the person who was applying, so I'm not necessarily looking for, so in most people that are gonna wanna apply early will just make that decision in fall, right? And so within that term, there should be a decision about whether the person is going to be able to get the permission to apply or not apply.
So I agree with that. So that's why I think it's important that that the person not really have to do much more maybe than submit their FPARs and a one-page rationale, as apparently you did, to just say, can you look at this and see if this smells like a potential early promotion? Sorry about the metaphor, but because when you say November 14th and you say all this time, but really, we're all faculty. When you get to mid-November, you're starting to hit Thanksgiving break and term projects coming in, and that is not a very convenient time, frankly. Let me finish. I'm agreeing though that your main point is true. You ought to be able to be guaranteed to know by the end of the term, but therefore I think maybe the sort of start of that process might have to start before November 14th in order to get 4 different groups all busy to get it done.
That's actually ahead of
Well, I was part of that committee that Sue mentioned, and it was a difficult process for us to decide. We did feel that early notification of going up for promotion, it's okay for you to go early, was an indication to the faculty personnel committee that it's been sort of, generically approved. And so it doesn't, this whole process of adding the personnel committee is actually adding another layer of approval to the layers that were already there. I'm not in favor of lowering the bar. I'm in favor of raising the bar. If I had, apologies to all people that go up early, and Margaret, for her fine work, I would be in favor of no early promotion. Because it's just problematic for this particular reason. I think that the problem is in the definition of what's exceptional. I mean, what's the word?
Rare
Rare,
situation.
what's rare and significant, and so rare is rare, right? And so that's pretty special, it's pretty high, it's very unusual, in my opinion. So I'm in favor of that higher bar, that really minimal circumstance for anybody to go early. And by adding something in the beginning, adds more work to everybody that may be not necessary, because down the line it's not rare for the personnel committee. So I just would hate to see like so many people scrambling to get promoted that it's sort of like minimizes the importance of that commitment to the institution year after year, which I value a lot as an old school person.
One thing I want to remind everyone is that this proposed language does add the notation by the program personnel committee in consultation with the chair, director, and provost does not guarantee the application for early promotion will be approved, which clarifies one of the problems.
That does help a little bit, but it doesn't help the definition of rare and significant, which I think is the more important part.
So let me ask this, because we only have about 4 more minutes scheduled for this discussion today. It seems to me that there are no actual objections that I have heard yet of the changes as they exist, only that there probably need to be more down the road. Is anyone interested in waiving the 2-week rule to actually get these particular changes on the books? Because now would be the time to do that, if interested.
I unfortunately had 2 more procedural questions. One is, we've got to be a little bit careful about how we approve bylaws. This was a question back for Ed way earlier. Were exactly these changes put forth for our body and then sort of, not tabled, I don't want to use that word, but disappeared? Because otherwise, we haven't given the faculty 7 full days notice.
Well, we did, because I sent this out on December 7th.
Okay, good. So that part, excellent. I have another question. And the question, I think we spent a lot of our time talking about the early promotions, and that was a good discussion. But also further, the other one is pretty small, but it's about the exception to the 5-year residency. You're not going up early in the sense of by what you're going up early on the residency, not early on the years and rank. And that little part, do you all understand those words to mean? And I'm just asking this question, that you have to have been here a year before you apply, or do you understand that to mean you can apply the January of your first year because you will have been here a year by the time you get the promotion? Because all of our other language and deadlines is in that latter spirit, but I had hoped what we meant, and I'm just asking the committee really, was your intent that you can't even apply until you have a full year residency.
Right.
That's how I read it, but it is a little bit at odds with all of the other deadlines. So as long as we all agree, nod our heads, get in the minutes, yeah, that's what we mean. Then I would like to move to the approving parts. And do you want the?
Do we have to waive the 2-week rule?
I move that we waive the 2-week rule to decide this question.
I just wonder how necessary it is to do that, because it's not really going to change anybody's situation.
Well, that's a fair question. So maybe you can speak to this. As far as you know, at this moment, do you know of anyone who will be impacted by this being passed immediately or not?
No, I know of no other individual who, no one who's contacted me. I would be shocked if they would have waited this long, so.
Well, the motion's been made. Does anyone want to second it? We can always wait.
If it doesn't matter.
We can always wait for 2 weeks.
Oh, I'll second it.
No second?
Because I would like to see some changes.
Okay. So we have a second. Any further discussion on the waiving of the 2-week rule?
I'm voting against my own motion.
I like it. All those in favor of waiving the 2-week rule on these bylaws, please raise your hand and indicate so.
So just clarification, just on the 2 bylaws changes that Lori brought forward.
Yes.
Okay.
The ones that were brought up like 2 years ago.
223 and 223.
Oh, if you put it now.
Yeah.
So all those in favor of waiving the 2-week rule so that we could vote to approve on those 2 changes, please indicate so by raising your hand.
This is amazing to me, Carol. This is the moment that you're the one person who wants to wait the 2 minutes.
I know.
All those opposed?
Nice and normal.
All right, any abstain?
Welcome back.
I'm still unclear about something. Are we then going to ask?
It'll come back on.
No, it has to come back.
2 weeks.
We're not doing it.
Yeah, so I'll put it on the
But I
agenda
don't
for
need
2
to vote
weeks.
for that, but
That's fine.
to put more work into it.
No.
Is
No.
that-
Can I just, for sake of argument, just, in 2 weeks, we
We'll come
potentially
back to
vote the
this.
2 changes,
Right.
and then as a discussion item, discuss process timeline
Yes, that's
for
my
early
intent.
promotion.
That's my intent. I think those, the other things we've discussed today are more than simply like, oh, let's tweak the language here. And it's gonna take some work. But I will put this back on the agenda for 2 weeks. So, last chance to talk to your constituents if there are any other objections to that. All right, last order of business. I intend to invite the division directors to Senate on our next meeting to follow up on their response to the survey we sort of sent them. And before I did that, I wanted to have a chance for us in the Senate to talk about it for a few minutes. Again, that was in the materials I sent out our last Senate meeting, and also resent them in this week's materials under feedback from directors on post-tenure review, responses to faculty Senate inquiry regarding evaluation process. So my question is, first of all, do we feel ready to have that conversation with the division directors? I sort of want the Senate to tell me it's good to invite them in. And are there any sort of pressing things that we sort of feel like we definitely need to tackle with them in that conversation?
So their mission was to, in part, as I recall, to tell us if there is a problem.
And they made a pretty specific request in here, in which they said, in the Senate discussion, it was agreed that the intention of allowing a senior faculty member to drop below acceptable in service or scholarship was to allow them to get much more heavily involved in the other areas. This is quite different from being minimally acceptable in the other 2 areas. Not reading the right section. There's somewhere where they asked. Oh, here we go. At the top of the 3rd page, they said, having the ability to evaluate the evaluation would empower directors to go back to evaluation committees when evaluations are problematic. This would give committees an opportunity to improve the evaluation and provide better feedback to the faculty member and subsequent evaluation committees. Common issues are overly short or vague evaluations, evaluations that do not appear to have critically weighed the evidence, and evaluation with ratings that don't appear to align with the program expectations document. So they are asking pretty much for a bylaws change to how FR review is done. So that is not insignificant.
The director is asking for a change to have
They said the colleague evaluation process gives the chair a role in that evaluation, but they are only one voice on the committee. Furthermore, it does not provide for any evaluation feedback from the director in evaluating the faculty member or in evaluating the evaluation. So that's for the peer review, the colleague review process, not the FR. They also had issues with FR. So they're coming with some things that they think Senate should do.
Yes,
we're ready for the discussion.
We're ready.
All right. Well, again, before that discussion, please do go over that document pretty carefully and make sure that you come with responses and questions for them.
Can I just ask, since I was in here last term, what initiated this process?
So you might recall that this actually began when you were still here. We a bylaw proposal came up. I don't remember the specifics, but it had to do with post-tenure review. And it was about that question of being inadequate in service and or,
No, I remember that very clearly.
Right, so after that advisory council asked the Senate, does it sound like a good idea to ask the division directors to have them collect data or something if that there are problems? So a survey was drawn up, started by Kimball Dennis, right? And then I finished that process and submitted it to the division directors. They wrote this in response to that. And then I thought it'd be a good idea because they're asking us to do things that we need to have action by.
They talk a lot about the evaluation process for colleagues and things, but that wasn't really I don't think, the essence of our inquiry. Because it was more like what kind of criteria is valuable after they reach a certain stage. In other words, like, it's not just about the colleague evaluation, it's about general performance. And they don't really address that very much. I mean, they're sort of critiquing the process of colleague evaluations, but not really saying what's acceptable or outstanding performance after that, after they get a certain rank.
May I? So we talked about that as maybe a different set of expectations post-tenure.
Right.
We had a couple of conversations.
Right.
Folks here at the table were involved in those. And I think the idea was to put all that on hold and just to define the problem. As I recall, it was really, I think, I'm paraphrasing, but let's see if we really have a problem with post-tenure review, whether it's happening, whether it's actually being done. That was one. And secondly, what are sort of the qualitative aspects of it? So quantifying the problem and maybe the more qualitative aspects. So I think that was the purpose of this document, was just really to say, yes, there's a problem, and here's where it manifests.
My read on the response was that they're basically saying that they aren't getting enough information and aren't involved enough in the process to fully answer our question. That's sort of how I read what they're saying, is that because the directors aren't involved in the full review and that they don't think some of these review materials are detailed enough, that they don't know whether there's a problem with it.
And there's no place for them to respond.
That seems to be their position. But all right, well, I will invite them, expect them to come in 2 weeks. Any announcements and new business?
Just one follow-up question. I thought directors had the ability to see your FRs.
They do.
They do.
And they write a comment
on that.
Yeah, they do. They comment. So
Which seems to contradict the original idea that, okay, forget it, I'll ask that.
That's a good idea.
I'm curious if the shutdown, the federal shutdown, is affecting the university anyway? Directly?
Only psychologically in my case. But I'm pursuing help with that. Not yet, but so there's been no issues with Pell or financial aid or things that are directly impacting students at this moment. So I haven't heard anything, but that is not to say that a partial shutdown won't go further into a more full shutdown. And if that's the case, our students will be directly impacted and possibly other areas of the institution. So thank you for the question. But right now we're able to get students, moving forward and get their aid and that sort of thing.
I was curious if you all are able to get into federal lands and things for the...
Oh, no, yeah. Parks are closed.
If you offer
and actually, you can go anywhere you want, but we're not going to promote that.
If you offer to do cleanup, I think they'll let you in.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, who's gonna
We got
stop
clean
you?
bathrooms over in there,
Yeah,
some volunteer bodies, yeah. Yeah, some of the places are definitely closed down, yeah.
Well, on a slightly brighter note, if you want to put on your calendars, the French dinner will be the 28th of February.
You cooking again?
Yeah, me. Well, actually, I'm making the salad dressing on, People complained that,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. People complained about the previous dressing, you couldn't smell it from 2 miles away, so. The garlic, that is, the garlic. The garlic. I'm taking care of it, yeah.
I'll make a quick announcement for anyone who has nothing to do at 7 p.m. tonight, just looking for somewhere to be entertained. In the art building in room 101, there's a digital cinema presentation. We have a long-standing cooperation with SOPTV in producing a series called The Jeffersonian that the students shoot, direct, and produce, edit, and all that. And so the new episode is premiering in AV 101, and we're doing a big to-do about it, and there'll be Q&A with the students on that. So
We had a student come back, one of our OEL graduates, Zach Nolan. He did an expedition to Pakistan and did a first ascent of some pretty amazing peaks. And we had the presentation here on campus. I'll send a link to you guys if you want to see an awesome 45-minute presentation of one of our students on a pretty major expedition in Pakistan. It was pretty amazing.
Any other notes?
Just a procedural question. Because of the holiday, do I understand correctly, the advisory council will not be meeting between this meeting?
That is correct. We've agreed to communicate via email about the agenda.
Okay, so if we have suggestions, we can send them to you?
Yes, you can still communicate with me as always.
Okay.
So our meeting will be.
Yes, our
Okay.
meeting will still be in 2
Great.
weeks. All right, adjourned.